Welcome to Newsbeacon, your trusted source for breaking headlines, global insights, and sharp analysis from around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. The humble tomato is more than just a salad staple or a colorful addition to your favorite dishes. It's a fruit with a story that stretches across borders, connecting people, economies, and cultures in ways most of us rarely consider. In North America, the tomato stands as a vibrant symbol of economic partnership and cultural exchange, linking the destinies of two neighboring nations, Mexico and the United States, through a shared love of food and commerce. For decades, tomatoes have journeyed from Mexico's sun-drenched fields to American tables, fueling a massive, often invisible cross-border supply chain. Every year, millions of pounds of tomatoes are carefully picked by hand, packed into crates, and sent north, crossing hundreds of miles and passing through countless hands before reaching your local grocery store. This flow of tomatoes has not only fed millions of people, but also sparked debates and tension between nations. The journey is smooth for the fruit, but not always for the people and businesses behind it. American consumers enjoy the luxury of fresh tomatoes year-round, even in the depths of winter. But for U.S. farmers, especially those in Florida, this abundance comes at a cost. They struggle to compete with the lower prices of imported Mexican tomatoes, putting their livelihoods at risk. Nearly 90% of U.S. tomato imports come from Mexico, which now supplies about 70% of all fresh tomatoes eaten in America. This staggering number highlights just how dependent the U.S. has become on its southern neighbor for this everyday fruit. The salsa on your chips at a summer barbecue, the juicy Roma slices on your sandwich at lunch, or the diced tomatoes in your homemade pasta sauce. Chances are, they all started their journey in Mexico's fertile soil. But when trade rules shift or political tensions rise, this carefully balanced system can be thrown into chaos, disrupting supply chains and leaving supermarket shelves empty. That's exactly what happened during the 2025 tomato crisis, when new tariffs and regulations sent shockwaves through the industry, making headlines and impacting families on both sides of the border. This is more than a simple trade spat or a disagreement over prices. It's a powerful lesson in how international policy decisions and economic forces shape the food on our plates and ultimately, the connections between nations. The next time you bite into a tomato, remember, you're tasting the result of a complex cross-border journey, one that reflects the challenges and opportunities of our globalized world. For nearly 3 decades, the Tomato Suspension Agreement acted as a fragile but vital peace treaty in the North American tomato market, quietly shaping the way tomatoes moved from Mexican fields to American tables. It was a pact that, for a generation, kept trade disputes at bay, and allowed both countries to benefit from a steady, predictable flow of this essential crop. Established in 1996, the agreement set minimum prices for Mexican tomatoes, aiming to prevent a flood of cheap imports from undercutting U.S. growers. This arrangement was designed to protect American farmers, especially in states like Florida, while still allowing Mexican producers access to the lucrative U.S. market. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Many American farmers believed the agreement was riddled with loopholes and that Mexican growers found ways to sidestep the rules, keeping prices low and competition fierce. Year after year, complaints grew louder, with accusations of unfair practices and calls for stricter enforcement. By July 2025, frustration had reached a breaking point. The U.S. Department of Commerce, led by Secretary Howard Lutnick, made the dramatic decision to withdraw from the pact, ending the long-standing truce and sending shockwaves through the agricultural world. Overnight, the U.S. imposed steep tariffs of 17% to 21% on most Mexican tomato imports. The move was swift and decisive, instantly raising the cost of Mexican tomatoes and upending established trade patterns. This marked a dramatic shift toward protectionism, as policymakers prioritized the complaints of Florida growers and other domestic producers over decades of free trade. The era of open borders for tomatoes was suddenly over, replaced by a new focus on shielding American agriculture from foreign competition. The tariffs were intended to help U.S. farmers by making imported tomatoes more expensive, giving domestic growers a fighting chance. But the sudden change also triggered a wave of uncertainty, leaving farmers, distributors, and retailers scrambling to adapt. The end of the agreement didn't just disrupt trade, it sent shockwaves through supply chains and kitchens across America. Supermarkets faced empty shelves, restaurants struggled to source fresh tomatoes, and prices soared for consumers. What was meant as a lifeline for struggling farmers quickly became a crisis for many others. Small business owners, families, and everyday shoppers all felt the impact as the humble tomato became a symbol of economic uncertainty. The tomato, once a symbol of cross-border cooperation and shared prosperity, now marked the beginning of a new era of agricultural conflict and division. The fallout would be felt far beyond the farm, reaching into rural communities, urban markets, and dinner tables across the nation, as the consequences of this broken truce continued to unfold. The U.S. didn't end the agreement on a whim. It was the result of years of mounting pressure from Florida growers, who felt their livelihoods slipping away season after season. For decades, Florida's tomato industry had been a cornerstone of the state's agricultural economy, supporting entire communities and generations of farm families. But as competition from Mexico intensified, the stakes grew higher. The Florida Tomato Exchange argued that Mexican producers were dumping tomatoes at prices up to 273% below fair value, making it impossible for local farms to survive. They claimed that Mexican growers, with government support and lower production costs, could flood the U.S. market with cheap tomatoes, undercutting American farmers at every turn. This wasn't just about business, it was about fairness and the future of American agriculture. With higher labor costs, stricter regulations, and shorter growing seasons, Florida's open-field farms couldn't compete with Mexico's year-round greenhouses. Mexican producers could harvest tomatoes even in the winter, while Florida farmers faced unpredictable weather and rising expenses. The playing field, they argued, was anything but level. The Department of Commerce agreed. After reviewing years of data and hearing from both sides, they concluded the agreement no longer protected U.S. growers. As a last resort, tariffs were imposed, aiming to restore balance and give American farmers a fighting chance. It was a dramatic move, signaling a shift in trade policy and a willingness to confront tough issues head-on. For Florida, this was a fight for survival. Thousands of jobs, local economies, and a way of life were at stake. Entire towns depended on the tomato harvest, from field workers to truck drivers to small business owners. The outcome would shape the future of rural communities across the state. But the move exposed deep divisions within American agriculture, pitting region against region. Not all U.S. growers agreed with Florida's approach. Some feared retaliation, while others worried about rising prices or losing access to Mexican produce. The debate revealed just how complex and interconnected the food system had become. The loudest voices came from the Southeast, but the consequences would ripple nationwide. From California to the Midwest, farmers, retailers, and consumers all felt the impact as the tomato dispute became a national issue. The tomato war was on, not just with Mexico, but within the U.S. itself. The battle lines were drawn, and the outcome would shape the future of the American tomato industry for years to come. The tariffs meant to save Florida farmers threatened to devastate border economies in Texas and Arizona. Cities like Laredo and Nogales depend on the flow of Mexican produce, especially tomatoes, for jobs and prosperity. Suddenly, importers, distributors, and truckers faced an uncertain future. Groups like the Fresh Produce Association of the Americas warned of job losses and business closures. Western growers who rely on Mexican imports to keep their operations running year-round were caught in the crossfire. The tariff fractured the U.S. agricultural community, revealing that growers' interests are far from unified. Critics predicted higher prices, supply chain chaos, and food inflation for American families. The attempt to help one region risked harming the entire network. In a global food system, protecting one link can weaken the whole chain. The tomato tariff's true cost was just beginning to emerge. Mexico didn't retaliate with tariffs, it played a smarter game. In August 2025, President Claudia Sheinbaum's government set its own minimum export prices for tomatoes sold to the U.S. This move addressed U.S. dumping accusations and stabilized prices for Mexican growers. Mexico's message: U.S. demand for Mexican tomatoes is too great to replace, even with tariffs. With year-round production and a massive market share, Mexico was confident it could weather the storm. The new price floors protected Mexican exporters and signaled a refusal to be bullied. Mexico exported nearly 1.8 million metric tons of tomatoes to the U.S. in 2025, worth billions. The country asserted its economic sovereignty, determined to keep its grip on the North American tomato market. The tomato trade had become a high-stakes chess match. The tariff didn't unite U.S. farmers, it split them. Florida growers cheered, seeing a chance to reclaim their market. But Western growers, importers, and logistics firms saw disaster-higher prices, lost jobs, and supply disruptions. The Fresh Produce Association of the Americas warned that U.S. production couldn't meet demand, and consumers would pay the price. The fight played out in Congress and the media, with each side claiming to defend American jobs. The tomato war revealed there's no single American interest in food, just competing regions and business models. The industry was at war with itself, and the nation was forced to pick sides. The humble tomato had become a symbol of division. The tomato dispute quickly became a political flashpoint in Washington. Southeast lawmakers praised the tariffs as a win for American farmers, while border state politicians, Democrats and Republicans alike, warned of economic disaster. Representative Vicente Gonzalez of Texas compared the looming tomato shortage to the recent egg crisis, predicting empty shelves and price spikes. The conflict erupted just as the U.S., Mexico, and Canada prepared to review the USMCA trade pact, raising diplomatic stakes. Critics argued the tariffs risked derailing broader trade talks and harming relations with key partners. Under pressure, President Trump paused further tariff hikes for 90 days, hoping for a negotiated solution. The future of the North American tomato market now hung in the balance. For most Americans, the tomato war hits home at the grocery store. Tariffs on nearly 70% of the nation's tomatoes mean higher prices and fewer choices. Year-round abundance, made possible by U.S.-Mexico cooperation, was suddenly at risk. Experts warned of shortages and price spikes, forcing consumers to pay more for local produce or accept less variety. Supporters of the tariff say it's a small price for food security. Critics argue it hurts low-income families most. The debate over tomatoes became a debate over what we value in our food system. Every trip to the produce aisle became a small act in a much larger story. The 2025 tomato dispute is a warning for the future of North American food. It exposed the tension between protecting local farmers and embracing global trade. The 90-day pause offers hope for a new deal, but deep disagreements remain. The crisis highlights U.S. dependence on migrant labor and Mexico's reliance on a single export market. The tomato war could reshape supply chains, immigration policy, and even diplomatic relations. Ultimately, every tomato on our plate is the product of complex choices and powerful forces. The outcome of this crisis will shape what we eat, how much it costs, and who grows it for years to come. The fate of the humble tomato is now a test for the continent's future.